Chapter 1, The Return to Roots. The gravel in the long driveway sounded different when Kevin drove over it now. It wasn't louder or softer, not really. Just heavier. Like each small stone carried an extra ounce of memory and decided to remind him of it all at once. He kept his hand steady on the steering wheel as the farmhouse came into view, framed by the old apple orchard that stretched behind it like a loyal sentinel. The house hadn't changed. White paint, slightly faded near the edges where summer sun always lingered longest. The porch rail still bowed in the same spot where his younger brother had once leaned too hard during a water balloon ambush. The wind chime, his grandmother's favorite, caught a stray breeze and answered with a clear, gentle sound. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like stepping into something unfinished. Kevin parked beside the barn and sat for a moment before turning off the engine. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It was wind moving through dry grass, distant clucks from the chickens, and the familiar rustle of leaves in the orchard. But one sound was missing. His grandfather's low, easy laugh. "Yeah," Kevin muttered under his breath, staring out the windshield, still noticing that part. He finally stepped out, boots hitting the ground with a faint crunch. The scent was immediate: earth, hay, a hint of fertilizer, and something green and living beneath it all. His chest tightened unexpectedly. The front door opened before he reached the steps. "Well, there you are," his grandmother called, her voice bright in a way that both reassured and worried him. "I was starting to think you'd taken a wrong turn and ended up in another state." Kevin smiled despite himself. "I drove here every summer for 18 years, Grandma. I think I remember the way." She didn't wait at the door. She came down the steps, arms already opening, and he met her halfway. The hug was firm, stronger than he expected, and it lingered just long enough to say everything neither of them wanted to say first. "You're too thin," she said as she leaned back, already assessing him. "That job of yours feeding you anything besides vending machine crackers?" "I eat," Kevin replied. "Sometimes even on purpose." "Hum." She gave him a look that suggested she would revisit that claim. "Well, you'll eat properly now. I've got stew on the stove. And bread. Fresh this morning." "Of course you do," he said. "Of course I do," she echoed, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. Inside, the house wrapped around him like a memory that hadn't quite faded. The wooden floors still creaked in the same places. The kitchen smelled exactly as it always had. Herbs drying near the window, something simmering on the stove, and the faint sweetness of honey. He set his bag down by the door. "You can put your things in your old room," she said. "I kept it more or less the same. Figured, well," she waved a hand, dismissing whatever thought had almost taken shape. "Figured I might need it again?" Kevin offered gently. She paused, then nodded. "Yes, something like that." He carried his bag up the stairs, feeling suddenly like he was 20 again instead of 36. The room was smaller than he remembered and exactly the size it needed to be. His grandmother wasn't exaggerating. Very little had changed. The same dresser, the same small desk, even the faint outline where an old poster had once been taped to the wall. Kevin exhaled slowly. "All right," he said to the empty room. "Guess we're doing this." Back downstairs, his grandmother had already set the table. "You didn't have to rush," he said, taking his seat. "I didn't rush," she replied. "I prepared. There's a difference." He lifted a hand in surrender. "I stand corrected." For a while, they ate in companionable quiet. Not awkward, just steady. The kind of silence that came from long familiarity. Finally, Kevin set his spoon down. "How bad is it?" Her eyes lifted to meet his, sharp and clear. "Now, Kevin Honeywell, that depends entirely on what you're asking." "The farm," he said. "Bills, taxes, everything Grandpa handled." She leaned back, considering him. "It's not falling apart if that's what you mean. I've kept things going as best I can." "But your grandfather had a system." She smiled faintly. "Actually, he had about 5 systems, none of which he ever wrote down." "That sounds about right." "I've been managing," she continued. "But there are gaps. Papers I can't quite make sense of. Calls I don't always know how to answer. And timing, well," she gestured vaguely toward the window. "The land doesn't wait for you to figure things out." Kevin nodded slowly. "Let me take a look at everything tomorrow. We'll sort through it together." "I was hoping you'd say that." She reached over and patted his hand. "Not because I can't manage, mind you, but because I don't particularly want to." He smiled. "That's fair." She tilted her head, studying him more closely now. "And what about you? What about me? You've uprooted your life to come here," she said plainly. "Don't tell me it's only for spreadsheets and tax forms. You're not that boring." Kevin chuckled. "Give me time. I could get there." "I doubt it." He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I didn't have a better reason not to come. My lease was up. Work's flexible. And," he hesitated, then shrugged. "It just felt like the right place to be." Her expression softened. "It is the right place." "I think so," he said quietly. Later that afternoon, Kevin walked the property alone. The fields stretched out wider than he remembered, though he knew that wasn't true. Distance had simply changed its meaning over the years. He crossed the familiar paths, boots brushing against grass that needed trimming, stopping now and then to check the condition of fences or irrigation lines out of habit. When he reached the orchard, he slowed. The apple trees stood in neat rows, their leaves whispering in the wind. He walked between them, fingers brushing against rough bark as he passed. This had always been his grandmother's domain, but his grandfather had been here too, fixing ladders, hauling crates, offering commentary that was half instruction and half gentle teasing. Kevin stopped beneath one of the older trees. "You'd probably tell me I'm overthinking everything," he said aloud. The wind answered, soft and steady. "Yeah, that sounds like you." He sank down onto the grass, leaning back against the trunk. For the first time since arriving, the weight in his chest shifted, not gone but different, sharper, clearer, because beneath the grief was something else. Possibility. He looked out over the land, really looked this time, not as a grandson visiting for a weekend, but as someone responsible for what came next. The fields weren't just work to maintain. They were space, opportunity. Ideas began to form, tentative at first, then gathering shape. He thought about the projects he'd loved in college. The way learning felt different when your hands were in the dirt. The way people connected when they built something together instead of just talking about it. He thought about the empty stretches of usable land. And he thought about his grandmother's kitchen, always full of purpose, always producing something that mattered. Kevin pushed himself to his feet. "All right," he said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Maybe we don't just keep it going." He looked back toward the house, where his grandmother would likely already be planning his dinner whether he wanted it or not. "Maybe we grow it." The wind shifted again, stirring the leaves above him like quiet applause. And for the first time since the funeral, Kevin felt something unexpected settle in alongside the grief. Not closure. Not yet. But direction. Chapter 2, Seeds of an Idea. The next morning began before the sun had fully committed to the day. Kevin stood at the kitchen sink, watching early light stretch across the fields like it was testing the ground before stepping onto it. He held a mug of coffee in one hand, stronger than he usually drank but exactly how his grandfather had preferred it. Behind him, cabinets opened and shut in a rhythm that needed no thought. "You're up early," his grandmother said, though she didn't sound surprised. "Goes with the territory," Kevin replied, glancing over his shoulder. "Hard to sleep in a place that expects you to do something useful with the daylight." She hummed approvingly. "That's your grandfather talking." "Yeah," he said quietly. They shared a look, brief, steady, before she turned back to her work. "I pulled out the bills," she said, gesturing toward a stack of folders on the table. "And whatever paperwork I could find that looked important. I may have included a few things that are not important at all." "That's fine," Kevin said. "If it has numbers on it, I'll figure out where it goes. And if it doesn't, I'll pretend it does until it makes sense." She smiled at that, setting a skillet onto the stove. "You always did have a creative approach to problem solving. More like survival," he said. "You ever try explaining to Grandpa why a project didn't work?" "He would have listened," she replied. "Yeah," Kevin agreed. "Then he would have handed me a shovel and said, 'Try again.'" "That sounds exactly right." They worked through the morning side by side, Kevin at the table, sorting through contracts, tax statements, and handwritten notes that only made partial sense. His grandmother moving between kitchen and pantry, occasionally pausing to peer over his shoulder. By mid-morning, Kevin leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "All right," he said slowly. "So, the good news is everything's salvageable. And the bad news?" she prompted. "The system is entirely in Grandpa's head," he said. "Or was, which means we're rebuilding it from scratch." She pursed her lips, then nodded. "I suspected as much." "It's not impossible," Kevin went on, leaning forward again. "We've got decent infrastructure, the land's still in good shape, and nothing's overdue beyond fixing. It just needs direction." "Direction," she echoed. "That's a polite way of saying it needs you." He shook his head. "No, it needs structure. Something sustainable." She watched him carefully now, sensing something taking shape. "You're thinking," she said. "Always dangerous," he replied. "Let it be dangerous. Tell me." Kevin hesitated, not because he didn't want to say it, but because saying it out loud would make it real. He tapped a pencil against the table. "Do you remember those college projects I used to go on about? The agricultural labs, the outreach programs? You mean the ones where you came home covered in dirt and insisted it was educational?" she asked dryly. "Those are the ones. I remember. They worked," Kevin said. "Not just for the students, but for the communities. Hands-on experience. Real skills. People actually connecting to what they were learning." She folded her arms lightly. "And you're thinking." "I'm thinking," he said, choosing his words carefully. "We've got over 20 acres here that aren't being used to their full potential. Natural water sources, existing structures, good soil." He gestured toward the window. "We could turn this into something more than just a farm we manage. It could be a place people come to learn." "Learn what?" "Everything you already do," he said, meeting her eyes. "Growing herbs, preserving food, Making oils, candles, all of it. And the basics too. Planting, harvesting, animal care. Real-world skills. Her expression didn't change right away, which made him rush to fill the silence. I'm not talking about turning it into a business operation overnight, he added. More like a program. Partner with the elementary school. Get kids out here a couple days a week. Let them see where their food comes from. Let them make something with their hands. And the rest of the land? She asked. We reach out to the college, Kevin said, gaining momentum. Offer part of the property for their agricultural students. Experimental plots, new methods, research, whatever they need that fits. It brings in support, maybe even funding. She tilted her head. And you think people would come? I know they would, he said. Because I would have at their age. And I did. That earned the ghost of a smile. You did, she agreed. He leaned forward, more certain now. And not just the schools. We could invite social programs, kids who don't usually get opportunities like this. Pair them with the younger ones. Let them teach each other in a way that actually matters. She was quiet for a long moment, then turned toward the window, looking out at the land that had been her life for decades. You're talking about filling this place again, she said softly. Kevin followed her gaze. Yeah, I think I am. With purpose. With purpose. She nodded slowly, as if feeling the idea settle into her bones. Your grandfather always said the land gives back what you put into it, she said. This would be a lot. It would, Kevin admitted. And you're prepared for that? He didn't answer immediately. I think so, he said finally. Or at least I'm willing to try. She turned back to him then, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen since before the funeral. Well, she said, clapping her hands together once, decisively. Then we'd better do it properly. Kevin blinked. That was faster approval than I expected. Oh, Kevin, she said, already moving toward the pantry. If you'd brought me a small, safe idea, I would have been disappointed in you. He laughed. Good to know my risk tolerance is appreciated. It is, she said firmly. And I know people. Plenty of them. Ladies from the market, my sister's friends, will organize the social side. If these young people are coming here, they'll learn more than just how to plant a seed. Something tells me they won't have a choice. Exactly. He stood, energy replacing the heaviness he'd been carrying since arriving. I should talk to Melissa, he said, reaching for his phone. She'll know how to approach the school properly. Your sister will be thrilled, his grandmother said knowingly. She's been trying to get students outside more for years. That's what I'm counting on. He stepped out onto the porch as he dialed, pacing as the line rang. Melissa answered on the second ring. If you're calling to tell me you've already reorganized the entire farm, I'm going to be very annoyed that I didn't get to help. Not yet, Kevin said. But I've got an idea. Oh good, she said immediately. I love when you start sentences like that. It always ends in either brilliance or chaos. Sometimes both. Hopefully both, he admitted. Listen. He laid out the plan, pacing slowly across the porch boards as he spoke. When he finished, there was a brief silence on the other end. Melissa, I'm still here, she said. I'm just deciding whether to hug you or lecture you. I'm hoping for the first one. You're getting both, she said. Kevin, this could actually work. The district's been looking for experiential programs. They'll ask for structure, plans, schedules, safety guidelines. But if we present it right, we can make it happen? We can make them listen, she corrected. Which is the first step. He grinned. I'll take that. Send me a draft of what you're thinking, she continued. We'll put something formal together. And Kevin, yeah, I'm really glad you're there, she said, her voice softening. Not just for Grandma, for you. He glanced out at the fields again. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. When the call ended, he didn't go back inside right away. Instead, he leaned against the porch railing, looking out over the land with new eyes, not as something to maintain, but something to build. Behind him, the faint clang of the wind chime carried through the open door. Don't worry, he murmured, almost unconsciously. We're just getting started. And somewhere between the orchard and the barn, between memory and possibility, the first real shape of the future began to take hold. Chapter 3, An Unplanned Partnership. The first problem announced itself with the kind of calm timing Kevin had come to distrust. It arrived in the form of a polite email, short, courteous, and quietly complicated. He read it twice at the kitchen table, then once more out loud, as though hearing it spoken might somehow make it simpler. It says they're interested, he said, lowering the phone and glancing toward his grandmother. But they want a coordinator involved before they move forward. Someone who works between the school district and the college outreach programs. That sounds sensible, she replied, not looking up from the bundle of herbs she was tying. Sensible people tend to like structure. Kevin leaned back in his chair. It also says she's already reviewed the preliminary draft Melissa sent over. She? His grandmother said, just a little too casually. He ignored the tone. Emily Carter. Apparently, she wants to meet tomorrow and go over practical expectations. That sounds promising, she said. That sounds like she's going to tell me everything that won't work, Kevin countered. His grandmother finally looked at him, one brow raised. And will she be wrong? Kevin opened his mouth, paused, then exhaled. No, probably not. Then you should listen. I will listen, he said. That doesn't mean I have to enjoy it. She smiled faintly. You didn't enjoy your grandfather correcting you either. And that turned out just fine. That's debatable, Kevin muttered. The meeting was set for mid-morning the next day. Kevin spent the early hours trying to make the farm look like it ran on organization instead of momentum. He stacked tools neatly in the barn, straightened work tables that didn't particularly need straightening, and brushed dirt from surfaces that would inevitably be dusty again within the hour. You're pacing, his grandmother observed from the doorway. I'm preparing. You are pacing while preparing. Multitasking, he corrected. She stepped inside, glancing around. If you wear a groove into that floor, I'll expect you to fix it. I fix everything now, apparently. She said. That's part of the job you gave yourself. Before he could respond, the low hum of a car engine drifted up the driveway. Kevin stilled. Well, his grandmother said, smoothing down her apron. There's your coordinator. He stepped outside, wiping his hands on a cloth as he went. The car that pulled in was practical, compact, clean, nothing flashy. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out, closing it with efficient precision before turning to face him. Emily Carter didn't hesitate. That was the first thing he noticed. She moved toward him with measured steps, already holding a folder tucked neatly against her side. Her posture was straight, her expression neutral but not unfriendly, and her eyes settled on him with a focused assessment that felt immediate and thorough. Mr. Honeywell? She said. Kevin's fine, he replied, stepping forward. Kevin, she corrected smoothly. I'm Emily Carter. They shook hands, hers firm, brief, and entirely professional. I appreciate you coming out, Kevin said. I know this is unconventional, she supplied. That's one way to put it. I would have said incomplete, she added. He blinked once. That too. She allowed the faintest trace of acknowledgement at his response before glancing past him toward the land. You have a beautiful property, she said. Thank you. It's been in the family a long time. I read that. She shifted the folder slightly. I also read your proposal. Kevin suppressed a wince. And it has potential, she said, which somehow sounded less comforting than he'd hoped. But it also has significant gaps, such as. She met his eyes again, calm and direct. Defined schedules, safety protocols, liability considerations, curriculum alignment for different age groups, role clarity between participating organizations, transportation logistics, weather contingencies. All right, he said, raising a hand gently. I get it. Do you? She asked, not unkindly. He exhaled. I know it's not polished. It wasn't meant to be final. Good, she said, because it can't move forward as it stands. His jaw tightened for a brief second, but he forced himself to nod. That's fair. She studied him again as if reassessing. You're not defensive, she observed. I am, he said. I'm just choosing not to act like it. Her mouth curved, just barely. That's useful. He gestured toward the barn. Want to walk the property? It might make more sense in person. I prefer that, she said. They set off across the yard, pace naturally falling into step. Kevin pointed out areas as they went. The east side has the best irrigation. That's where I was thinking we'd start with the younger groups. Simple planting projects, easy access. Emily nodded, making notes without breaking stride. And supervision? I'd be there. My grandmother too, depending on the activity. Possibly volunteers. Defined ratios? She asked. Kevin hesitated. Not yet. She jotted something down. We'll need those. I assumed. Assumptions don't hold up in district reviews, she said evenly. Noted. They continued, moving toward the orchard. This would be ideal for seasonal programs, Kevin said. Harvests, preservation lessons, things that connect directly to what they're learning. Integrated curriculum, Emily murmured. That could work well. He glanced at her. That sounded almost approving. It was, she said. Don't get used to it. He huffed a quiet laugh. I'll try not to let it go to my head. They stopped beneath one of the older apple trees. Emily turned slowly, taking in the rows, the spacing, the condition of the soil. This place has good bones, she said after a moment. Kevin felt something ease in his chest. It does. But bones aren't enough, she continued. Of course not. She closed her folder, focusing fully on him now. Tell me why you're doing this. The question was sharper than he expected. I already did, he said. It's in the proposal. I read the proposal, she replied. Now I'm asking you. Kevin hesitated, searching for something that wasn't just words arranged to sound convincing. Because this place mattered growing up, he said finally. It taught me things I didn't realize I'd need until much later. And now it's quiet. Emily didn't interrupt. I don't want it to just sit here, he went on. I want it to be useful. For people who might need it the same way I did. Silence stretched for a moment. All right, she said. All right, he echoed. That's a reason I can work with. He blinked. That's it. That's the foundation, she clarified. Everything else is structure. And you're here for the structure. Yes. Kevin rubbed the back of his neck. Fair warning. I'm not great with rigid systems. I'm not great without them, she said. They held each other's gaze for a beat, the tension not hostile but unmistakably present. Well, he said at last, this should be interesting. Yes, Emily agreed. It will. They started back toward the house, conversation shifting into specifics, timelines, partnerships, draft revisions, but something subtle had changed. The friction was still there, but it no longer felt like opposition, felt like alignment waiting to happen. At the porch steps, Kevin paused. So, are you in? Or are we still in significant gaps territory? Emily considered him for a moment. I'm in, she said. Conditionally. I'll take conditional. You'll take revision, she corrected. A lot of it. He smiled, just slightly. I figured. She stepped onto the porch, glancing once more at the land behind him. You have something worth building here, Kevin, she said. Try not to get in your own way while we do it. I'll do my best, he said. As she turned to gather her things, Kevin found himself watching her. Not just her efficiency or her precision, but the way she moved through the space like she was already fitting it into something larger. Plan. A system. A future that looked different from the one he'd imagined, but not wrong. Not wrong at all. And for the first time since the idea had taken root, Kevin realized something he hadn't quite anticipated. He wasn't building this alone anymore. Whether he was ready for that or not was still an open question. Chapter 4, Weathering Expectations. The first group of students arrived 10 minutes early. Kevin noticed because he had been staring at the gravel drive for the past half hour, trying very hard not to look like he was waiting. The moment the school bus lumbered into view, he straightened, instinctively wiping his hands on his jeans, even though they were already clean. From beside him, Emily flipped a page in her binder without looking up. You're pacing again. I'm standing, Kevin replied. You've changed position 3 times in the last minute. That's called adjusting. That's called pacing, she said calmly. He glanced at her, then back at the bus. You're remarkably observant today. I'm always observant. Today you're just more obvious. He opened his mouth to respond, then shut it as the bus came to a stop. The door folded open with a sharp mechanical hiss. And then, like the release of contained energy, the children poured out. Energy was too small a word for it. They spilled onto the gravel in a loose, excited cluster, voices overlapping, teachers calling for order that only partially settled everyone into recognizable lines. Kevin felt something unexpected rise in his chest. Not anxiety. Recognition. All right, Emily said beside him, finally closing her binder. This is the moment where your idea meets reality. Encouraging, he muttered. Accurate, she corrected. The lead teacher approached first, a woman Kevin recognized from Melissa's earlier descriptions. Mr. Honeywell? She called. Kevin, please, he said, stepping forward with a welcoming smile. You made good time. Traffic was kind to us, she said, which usually means the rest of the day will not be. That's reassuring, he said. She laughed lightly. These are my 3rd graders. They've been talking about this all week. That explained the buzz of barely contained excitement. Kevin turned to address the group. All right, everyone, welcome to the Honeywell farm. He paused, scanning their faces. Quick question before we start. How many of you have ever planted something before? A few hands shot up. Not all. Good, he said. Then we've got a mix of experience. That's perfect. Before we begin, Emily said smoothly, stepping in beside him, we're going to go over expectations. Kevin stepped back, letting her take the lead. Her voice shifted, clear, structured, steady. You'll be divided into small groups. Each group will stay with your assigned adult at all times. You'll have designated areas for each activity, and will rotate through them on a schedule. Kevin watched the children straighten, their attention focusing in a way that hadn't quite happened before. And most importantly, Emily continued, this is a working farm. That means we respect the space, the tools, and each other. If you're not sure about something, you ask. Understood. A chorus of yes rippled through the group. Kevin leaned toward her slightly. You're good at that. I told you, she replied quietly. Structure, right? They broke into groups soon after. Kevin led the first rotation, guiding a handful of children toward the small planting area he'd prepared that morning. The soil had been turned neatly, rows marked with simple wooden stakes. Okay, he said, crouching down. This might look like dirt. It is dirt, one boy interrupted confidently. Kevin grinned. You're not wrong, but it's also more than that. This, he scooped up a handful, is where everything starts. A girl beside him leaned closer. Even carrots? Especially carrots, he said. Carrots are ambitious. She nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. As the activity began, Kevin found his rhythm quickly. He showed them how to plant seeds, how deep to go, how to cover them without packing the soil too tight. This isn't about doing it perfectly, he said. It's about giving it a chance to grow. Will it grow today? Another student asked. No, he said, smiling. This part takes patience. A collective groan followed that answer. Thought so, he added. Across the way, he caught glimpses of Emily running another group through a different station. Labeling materials, explaining processes, guiding without losing control of the room. Different styles. Same goal. For a while, everything worked. And then, like any good plan meeting reality, things started to slip. It began with the wind. A sudden gust swept across the open fields, scattering a stack of lightweight planting markers Kevin had left balanced on the edge of a table. At the same time, one group drifted just slightly out of line, curiosity pulling them toward an area that wasn't part of the current rotation. Hey, let's stay within the markers, Kevin called, stepping forward. I just wanted to see the chickens, one boy protested. We'll get there, Kevin said. One thing at a time. Behind him, he heard raised voices, not angry, just louder than they had been. Emily. He turned to find her crouched near a group of students, one of whom looked on the verge of tears. It's all right, she was saying, her tone softened but still controlled. You didn't do anything wrong. You just needed to wait for instructions so we could do it safely. I didn't break it on purpose, the girl sniffed. I know, Emily said. That's why we fix it and try again. Kevin moved closer. Everything okay? Emily stood, brushing her hands together. A minor mishap. One of the containers tipped. No damage beyond a bruised ego. The girl managed a small smile. Kevin crouched slightly. Happens to everyone. You should have seen me the first time I tried to carry a full crate of apples. What happened? She asked. I dropped half of them before I took 3 steps. Did you get in trouble? He shook his head. Nope. I got handed another crate and told to try again. She considered that, then nodded. Okay. Okay, he echoed. The day continued, messier than the neat schedule suggested, but not unraveling. Near midday, Kevin found himself beside Emily again as the groups rotated for lunch. Well? He asked. She took a measured breath. We've had 3 minor deviations from schedule, 1 supply issue, and a brief lapse in group cohesion. That sounds like a complicated way of saying it's going pretty well. It's a realistic assessment, she said. He leaned against the table. You didn't say it was going badly. A pause. No, she admitted. It's not. He nodded toward the kids, now sitting in clusters with their lunches, laughter rising easily in the open air. They're having a good time. They are, she agreed. And learning, he added. She glanced at the planting rows, then at the labeled workstations, then back at the students. Yes, she said. They are. Kevin studied her expression. That sounds like you didn't expect that part. I expected it to work, she said. I didn't expect it to feel. She hesitated. Different, he offered. She looked at him just briefly. Yes, he smiled. That's the part one was hoping for. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the students scatter crumbs and stories in equal measure. You improvise, Emily said suddenly. I adapt, he corrected. You adjust without always consulting the plan. The plan's a guide, he said. Not a rulebook. She crossed her arms lightly. That's exactly what makes you effective. He raised an eyebrow. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was, she said. Don't get used to it. He laughed. I'll try not to. And you need structure, he added. Her lips curved faintly. I was wondering when you'd notice that out loud. You keep things from falling apart, he said. Even when something unexpected happens. That's the goal, she replied. He tilted his head. You know, we might actually make a good team. Emily considered that. We might, she said. No edge to it. No resistance. Just quiet acknowledgement. In the distance, a child called out, waving excitedly from the edge of the orchard. Mr. Honeywell. Look. Kevin pushed off the table. Guess we're needed. Apparently, Emily said. They walked back toward the activity together, not in perfect sync, but close enough to feel the rhythm forming. The farm wasn't quiet anymore. It was loud, unpredictable, and alive in ways Kevin hadn't heard in years. And despite the small missteps, the shifting plans, the constant adjustments, it was working. Not perfectly, but genuinely. And somehow that felt better than perfect ever could. Chapter 5 Growth Patterns. The rhythm of the farm changed in ways Kevin couldn't fully trace, only recognize. What had once been predictable, quiet mornings, steady chores, long stretches of solitary work, had given way to something more layered. There were schedules now, voices, vehicles arriving at set times, and the subtle but constant presence of planning woven through everything. And at the center of it, more often than not, was Emily. Kevin leaned against the fence near the animal enclosure, watching as a group of older students carefully measured feed portions under Emily's direction. She moved among them with practiced efficiency, adjusting posture here, clarifying instructions there, her tone never sharp but always precise. You're supposed to level it, she said, tapping lightly on the edge of a scoop. If you overfill, the ratio changes. A boy frowned slightly. It's just a little more. It's consistency, she corrected. Try again. Kevin smirked faintly to himself. That was exactly how she approached everything. Small adjustments that added up to something solid. You're staring. He glanced to his right to find his grandmother stepping up beside him, hands tucked comfortably into her sweater pockets. I'm observing, he said. She replied. And what are you observing? That we would have lost at least half the schedule by now without her. His grandmother followed his gaze, watching Emily guide a hesitant student through the task. She's good, she said simply. She is, Kevin admitted. Annoyingly good. That sounds like admiration. That sounds like honesty, he corrected. She studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. Careful, Kevin. You're going to start sounding impressed. I am impressed, he said before catching himself. Just, in a professional sense. Of course, she said, in a tone that made it very clear she did not entirely believe him. Later that afternoon, the farm quieted again after the last group left. The lingering hum of activity faded into the more familiar sounds of wind and distant birds. Kevin stood at one of the work tables, sorting tools back into their proper places, when he heard the soft thud of a binder closing behind him. You reorganized the stations, Emily said. Yes, he replied without turning. Flow was better if everything moved clockwise instead of backtracking. A pause. That's a structural adjustment. He glanced over his shoulder. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised, she said. I'm noting improvement. High praise, he said dryly. She stepped closer, setting her binder on the table. It is effective. Transitions were smoother, and there was less confusion between groups. Kevin turned fully now, leaning back against the edge of the table. You've got a compliment hidden in there somewhere, don't you? She considered that, then nodded once. Yes. He waited. You adapted the plan based on observed inefficiencies, she said. That's what you're supposed to do. And here I thought I was just making it up as I went along. You were, she said, but with increasing accuracy. He laughed. I'll take that. For a moment, neither of them moved. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt earned after the day's activity. You handle the unpredictable well, Emily said, her tone more thoughtful now. Kevin shrugged. Comes with the job. Plants don't follow schedules either. I prefer things that can be measured, she admitted. I noticed. And yet, she added, glancing around the farm. This works. It does, he said. She met his eyes. Why? The question caught him off guard. Not because it was difficult, but because it felt more personal than practical. Because it's not just the plan, he said slowly. It's the people using it. The kids, the teachers, you. You're including me? She asked, one brow lifting slightly. You keep everything from falling apart, he said plainly. I just make sure there's something worth holding together. Emily didn't respond right away. That's a simplification, she said eventually. Maybe, he allowed. But it's true. Something softened in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but less distance. You're better at this than you think, she said. Careful, he replied. That almost sounded like encouragement. It was, she said. He smiled faintly. I'll try not to let it go to my head. The next project was smaller, more controlled. One Emily had insisted on structuring carefully from the start. Candle making. Kevin had watched his grandmother do it for years, the process as familiar to him as breathing. But seeing it translated into an organized activity was something else entirely. Stations are arranged in sequence, Emily explained, gesturing to the tables they had set up under the shade of a large tree. Melting, pouring, setting. No overlap. And if someone decides to skip steps? Kevin asked. She met his gaze. They won't. That confident? I am, she said. When the group arrived, Kevin stayed back for a moment, letting Emily lead. Each of you will complete the full process, she instructed, her voice steady and clear. You'll work carefully and follow directions at each station. If you're unsure, you ask. Kevin watched the students nod, their attention fixed on her. You're kind of intimidating, he murmured when she stepped back. I'm clear, she corrected. Same effect on 10-year-olds. She gave him a brief look. And on you. Not even close. The corner of her mouth lifted, just barely, but enough that he caught it. As the activity unfolded, Kevin stepped in where needed, demonstrating techniques, offering quiet encouragement. The students moved through the process more smoothly than he expected, their focus sharper, their movements more deliberate. At one point, he found himself beside Emily again, watching a pair of students carefully pour melted wax into molds. You were right, he said. I usually am, she replied. He snorted. About the structure. It helps. It guides, she said. And the rest is choice, she said. That's where you come in. He glanced at her, surprised by the phrasing. I handle the predictable variables, she continued. You handle the human ones. That sounds more complicated than it feels. It is more complicated, she said. You just don't treat it that way. He considered that, then shrugged. Maybe that's the point. Their shoulders brushed slightly as they shifted positions to make room for a passing student. It wasn't much, just a moment of contact. But neither of them moved away immediately. Instead, they adjusted subtly, naturally, continuing the work without comment. By the time the group left, the late afternoon sun had softened into something golden and calm. Kevin's grandmother joined them as they packed up the equipment, examining the finished candles with quiet approval. These are good, she said. Carefully done. Structured instruction, Emily said. Kevin smirked. See? You're getting credit. As I should, she replied. His grandmother's gaze shifted between them, thoughtful. You make a good pair, she said. Kevin coughed lightly. Team. Good team. That's what I said, she replied, entirely unbothered. Emily, for once, didn't correct her. Instead, she adjusted the stack of finished candles, aligning them neatly. Yes, she said. We do. Kevin glanced at her. Something unfamiliar settling somewhere just beneath the surface. Not uncomfortable, just new. As the sun dipped lower and the farm settled into evening, he realized something had shifted. Not in the structure of the program, not in the plans or the schedules. In him. Because this collaboration, this shared purpose, was beginning to feel less like an obligation and more like something he didn't want to walk away from. And for a man who had spent most of his life careful about what he committed to, that realization carried more weight than he was entirely ready to admit. Chapter 6, The Harvest Festival Mishap. The idea for the Harvest Festival had started small. That, Kevin would later decide, was the first mistake. It doesn't have to be complicated, he had said 2 weeks earlier, leaning against the kitchen counter while his grandmother sorted through a basket of apples. Just something simple. A way to show people what we're doing here. Emily had been standing nearby, reviewing schedules, her pen pausing mid-note. Simple requires definition, she had said. Simple means we invite people, Kevin replied. Maybe set up a few demonstrations. Let the kids show off what they've learned. And manage attendance? She had asked, already thinking 3 steps ahead. We'll keep it local, he said. Community-based. How? She followed. He had shrugged. Word of mouth. That was the second mistake. By the time the day of the Harvest Festival arrived, word of mouth had turned into something far less predictable. Kevin stood near the driveway, staring at the line of cars stretching farther than he'd anticipated. Families stepped out in clusters, children darting ahead, parents scanning the surroundings with interest, neighbors waving as though this were already an established tradition instead of a first attempt. Well, Kevin muttered, running a hand over the back of his neck. That escalated. Beside him, Emily surveyed the scene with a carefully controlled expression. How many people were you expecting? She asked. He hesitated. Half. That's not a number. Less than this, he clarified. She nodded once. Accurate. His grandmother joined them on the porch, her eyes bright despite the growing crowd. Isn't this wonderful? It's something, Kevin said. Emily flipped open her binder, scanning quickly. We'll need to adjust flow immediately. The rotation schedule won't hold at this volume. Translation? Kevin asked. We don't follow the schedule, she said. We adapt. He glanced at her, a grin flickering despite everything. Look at you. This is not the time, she replied, though there was the faintest trace of amusement beneath her tone. The first hour was controlled chaos. Stations that had been designed for small groups were suddenly surrounded on all sides. The candle-making table drew a steady line of curious participants, while the orchard tour gathered momentum in a way Kevin hadn't planned for. Maybe we stagger groups? He suggested, stepping beside Emily as she redirected a cluster of families toward a less crowded area. We don't have the structure to enforce that, she said. We guide instead. Guide, he echoed. Got it. A shout from across the yard pulled his attention. Mr. Honeywell, one of the students called, pointing toward the equipment table. Something's wrong. Kevin jogged over, weaving through the crowd. A small group had gathered around the pressing station, one of the borrowed cider presses they'd set up for demonstration. What happened? Kevin asked. It stopped, a boy said. It was working before. Kevin crouched, examining the mechanism. The handle was stiff, resistance where there shouldn't have been any. Looks like a jam, he said. Probably too much pressure at once. Can we fix it? The boy asked. Yeah, Kevin replied. We just need to back it out carefully. He glanced up to find Emily already stepping beside him. Do you need assistance? She asked. Nope, he said. But I might need space. She turned to the group without hesitation. Everyone step back 3 feet, please. Give him room to work. The response was immediate. People shifted, the circle widening. Kevin worked the mechanism loose, adjusting the pressure slowly until the jam gave way with a soft, satisfying release. There we go, he said, standing. See? Not broken. Just needed patience. Patience, the boy repeated, as if filing it away for future use. Exactly. Across the yard, a ripple of laughter rose. Something light, unforced. Kevin turned to find his grandmother leading a group of children through a demonstration of apple butter preparation. her movement steady, her voice warm and engaging. "She's thriving," Emily observed. "She is," Kevin said. "Did you expect that?" "I hoped for it," he replied. "But this," he gestured toward the crowd. "This is more than I expected." Emily followed his gaze, thoughtful. "It's more than planned. Is that a problem?" She paused. "Not necessarily." Before he could respond, a sudden gust of wind swept across the open field again. Stronger this time. Lightweight materials shifted. A stack of paper handouts lifted from a nearby table, scattering across the grass. "Oh no," someone called. Kevin exhaled sharply. "All right, I've got coordination," Emily said quickly, already stepping forward. "You handle retrieval." "Yes, ma'am," he said, moving immediately. He jogged across the field, catching as many runaway pages as he could, laughing despite himself as a few stubborn sheets danced just out of reach. "Come back here," he muttered, snagging one midair. Behind him, he could hear Emily directing with calm precision. "Please stay near the main area," she called. "We'll continue in just a moment." By the time Kevin returned, slightly winded and holding a half-collected stack of papers, the crowd had settled again. Emily took the pages from him, smoothing them out and reorganizing the pile. "Recovered," she said. "Barely," he replied. "We're one strong breeze away from distributing those across the county." "Noted," she said. For a moment, they stood there, breathing, resetting, recalibrating. Then Kevin let out a quiet laugh. "What?" Emily asked. "This," he said, gesturing around them. "All of it. It's a mess. It's unstructured," she corrected. "It's chaotic. It's active." He looked at her, a spark of something lighter in his expression. "Are you enjoying this?" Emily hesitated. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. "Yes. Really? Yes," she said. "It's effective." He shook his head, still smiling. "That's not the word I would have chosen. It's the correct one." "Fair enough." As the afternoon stretched on, the chaos softened into something more manageable. People settled into the rhythm of the space. Conversations grew easier. Children moved from station to station with growing confidence. Laughter carried across the fields, blending with the steady work of the farm. Kevin found himself standing beside Emily again as the sun dipped lower, casting everything in warm gold. "Well," he said, "we survived. We adapted," she replied. "Same thing." "Not quite." He glanced at her. "You're still thinking about the schedule, aren't you?" "I'm thinking about scalability," she said. "That sounds dangerous." "It's practical," she corrected. "If we do this again." "When we do this again," he interrupted. She looked at him, considering. "When we do this again," she amended. "We prepare differently." He nodded. "Agreed." A brief silence settled between them. Then, almost without thinking, Kevin said, "You didn't panic." Emily blinked. "I don't panic. Most people would have," he said. "This got bigger than expected. Faster than expected." "I assessed," she replied. "And adapted," he added. "Yes." He studied her for a moment, then smiled. Slower this time, more genuine. "I'm glad you're here," he said. The words landed between them, simple but unguarded. Emily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out over the farm, the people, the movement, the life that had filled the space so completely. "So am I," she said quietly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. But it was honest. And for Kevin, standing there with the remnants of controlled chaos settling into something meaningful, it felt like the most important thing that had happened all day. Because somewhere between the scattered papers, the broken schedule, and the unexpected crowd, they had stopped just working together. They had started trusting each other. And that, he realized, was going to change everything. Chapter 7, What Remains Unspoken. The quiet returned more slowly than Kevin expected. After the harvest festival, the farm didn't snap back to its earlier rhythm. It eased into it, like a field settling after a storm. The energy lingered in small ways. Tire tracks still faintly pressed into the driveway, a misplaced sign leaning against the barn, the occasional question from a passerby asking when the next one would be. Kevin stood in the orchard that morning, hands resting on his hips as he surveyed the rows. The trees looked the same, solid, unmoved, but something about the space felt fuller, as though the echoes of the festival hadn't quite cleared. "You're doing it again." He didn't turn. "Doing what?" Thinking out loud without speaking. Emily's voice carried easily across the row as she approached, a folder tucked under her arm as usual. She had traded her more formal attire for something practical, boots, rolled sleeves, but there was still a precision to her movements that didn't quite blend with the looseness of the farm. Kevin glanced at her finally. "You say that like it's a bad thing. It's inefficient," she said. "I'm off the clock," he replied. "I'm allowed inefficiency." She stopped beside him, following his gaze across the orchard. "You're considering something. That's generous," he said. "I was staring at a tree 5 minutes ago thinking about lunch." "That's not true." He huffed a quiet laugh. "No, it's not." A breeze shifted through the leaves above them, soft but steady. Emily adjusted her grip on the folder. Melissa sent an update from the district. That sounds official, Kevin said. Should I be nervous? You should be prepared, she replied. They want to formalize the program. He turned fully toward her now. Formalize how? Funding proposals, long-term integration, dedicated staffing. Kevin processed that in silence for a moment. Staffing, he repeated. As in, people hired to run this? Yes. And I'd be what? A consultant. Her expression remained neutral. That depends on how you position yourself. He looked away back toward the trees. That wasn't the plan, he said. The plan has evolved, Emily replied. That's one way to put it. Another pause settled between them, heavier this time. You don't like it, she said. It's not that, Kevin replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. It just changes things. In what way? He let out a slow breath. This started as something personal. Helping my grandmother. Honoring my grandfather. Now it's becoming something else. Something larger, Emily said. Yeah. And that's a problem? He hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. Emily studied him carefully. You're worried about losing control, she said. I'm worried about losing what it is, he corrected. Once you formalize something, you start adding layers, expectations, rules. It stops being this. He gestured vaguely around them. The orchard, the open space, the unpolished edges. It becomes something structured, she said. Exactly. And you don't trust that. He smiled faintly. I think you already know I don't trust that. For the record, she said, structure doesn't erase purpose. No, he agreed, but it can bury it. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped past him, walking a few paces deeper into the orchard before turning back. And what about you? She asked. What about me? Where do you fit in this? She pressed. If this doesn't formalize, if it stays exactly as it is, what's your plan? Kevin blinked. My plan? Yes, she said. You had a life before this. Career. Place. Is this temporary or? She didn't finish the thought, but the question hung there anyway. Kevin ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of how little he had let himself think about that part. I was going to go back, he said slowly. Eventually. And now. He looked at her, really looked, even as he struggled to find a clear answer. I don't know, he admitted. The honesty landed heavier than he expected. Emily nodded once, but her gaze shifted away. That uncertainty matters, she said. For the program. For the long-term planning. There it is, he said, a hint of frustration creeping in. Back to structure. It's not just structure, she replied, her tone sharpening slightly. It's sustainability. You can't build something like this without knowing who's going to carry it forward. I am carrying it forward, he said. For now, she countered. The words hit harder than he wanted them to. For now, he echoed. Another silence. This one didn't feel as easy as the others had. Emily broke it first. I've been offered a position, she said. Kevin straightened. Offered a… What kind of position? Regional coordination, she replied. It would expand programs like this across multiple sites. That's big, he said. It is. And you're considering it? I need to give them an answer soon. Kevin nodded slowly, processing. That makes sense, he said, though something in his voice had shifted. It's a significant opportunity, she continued. It would mean scaling what we've done here, structuring it properly so it can be replicated. Of course it would, he said. She studied him again. You don't sound enthusiastic. I am, he said quickly. It's just… He stopped himself. Just what? She pressed. He looked out at the orchard again, searching for words that didn't feel like he was losing ground. Just that it sounds like you'll be gone, he said finally. Emily didn't answer right away. Yes, she said after a moment. It would require relocating. Kevin nodded. Right, he said. The breeze shifted again, rustling the leaves in a way that filled the silence without easing it. You should take it, he added almost automatically. Her expression flickered, not quite surprise, not quite disappointment. You think so? She asked. It's what you do, he said. Big picture planning, systems, growth. This is exactly that. And here? She asked quietly. Kevin hesitated, then forced a small shrug. This will keep going. With or without me? With or without either of us, probably, he said. The words sounded practical. They didn't feel that way. Emily held his gaze for a long moment, as if waiting for something more. But when it didn't come, she nodded. Then I'll consider that, she said. Good, he replied. Neither of them moved. Neither of them said what was actually pressing beneath the surface. The orchard stood between them, familiar, steady, unchanged. But the space felt different now, like something important had shifted just out of reach. Finally, Emily adjusted the folder in her hands. I should finalize the report for the district, she said. There are decisions to be made. Yeah, Kevin said. There are. She turned, starting back toward the house. Kevin watched her go, the distance between them growing in a way that had nothing to do with space. A dozen thoughts pressed at the edge of his mind. Things he could say, questions he could ask, reasons he could give. But none of them felt certain. And certainty, he realized too late, was what she understood. What she needed. Emily, he called. She paused, looking back. For a moment, it felt like the right words were just within reach. Instead, he said, "Let me know what you decide." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "I will," she said. Then she turned again, continuing toward the house. Kevin stood alone in the orchard, the weight of the unsaid settling heavier than anything they had spoken aloud. The farm was still alive, still growing, but for the first time since he'd returned, he wasn't entirely sure which direction it was headed, or whether he'd have the courage to follow it when it did. Chapter 8, a season worth staying for. The decision did not come all at once. Kevin would later wish it had, something clean, decisive, the kind of clarity that made for easy explanations. Instead, it arrived in pieces, scattered across quiet moments he hadn't planned to examine too closely. It showed up in the early mornings, when he stepped out onto the porch and found himself already thinking about what needed to be done that day. Not out of obligation, but because he wanted to be part of it. It settled in during the long afternoons, when the programs ran smoothly enough that he could step back and watch the students take ownership of what they'd learned. And it stayed, stubborn and undeniable, every time he noticed the absence of someone who hadn't quite left yet. Emily. Kevin leaned against the familiar porch railing, the wood worn smooth beneath his palms. Below him, the late afternoon light stretched long across the fields, turning everything into shades of gold and quiet promise. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. "You've been out here a while," his grandmother said, stepping beside him. "Just thinking." She nodded, as if that explained everything. "That can be productive if you don't overdo it." "I might be overdoing it." "I thought so." Kevin smiled faintly. She studied him for a moment, then followed his gaze out toward the orchard. "She's leaving soon, isn't she?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "She hasn't said for sure," he replied. "But it sounds like she will." "And you?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because saying it would make it real. "I was going to go back," he said. "To my job. My place." "Was?" Kevin exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he admitted. His grandmother nodded again, softer this time. "And now?" "I don't think that fits anymore," he said. She turned to him, her expression calm but knowing. "Then don't force it to. It's not that simple." "It is," she said. "It's just not easy." Kevin laughed under his breath. "That sounds like something Grandpa would say." "That's because he was right," she replied. He looked back out at the land, the fields, the barn, the orchard that had shaped so much of his life without him realizing it. "I started all of this because I thought it would be temporary," he said. "Something to help, something to fix." "And what is it now?" she asked. He didn't hesitate this time. "Something I want to keep." His grandmother smiled. "Well," she said simply, "there's your answer." Emily found him in the orchard. Of course she did. It was where the decisions always seemed to land. Quietly, without distraction, surrounded by something that reminded him what mattered. "You're hard to find," she said, stepping between the rows. "You know exactly where to look," he replied. "That's true," she allowed. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that he could see the careful control in her expression, the way she held herself when something important was waiting underneath. "I finalized the report," she said, holding the folder at her side. "That sounds official." "It is." Pause. "They're moving forward with the program." "That's great. They want to expand it," she added. "Use this as a model." Kevin nodded slowly. "I figured they would. And they've asked me to lead the initiative." He met her eyes. "Are you going to?" Another pause. "I haven't decided," she said. He blinked. I said I was considering it," she corrected gently. "Not that I'd already chosen." Kevin let out a quiet breath. "Right?" Silence settled between them again. But this time, it didn't feel like distance. Felt like something waiting. "I thought I knew exactly what this was supposed to become," Emily said, her voice quieter now. "Something scalable. Something structured that could be replicated." "And now?" Kevin asked. She shifted slightly, glancing around the orchard before meeting his eyes again. "Now I think, not everything worth building fits into a system." He smiled faintly. "Careful. That almost sounds like my philosophy creeping in." "It's an observation," she said. "Not a conversion." "I'll take it." Another quiet moment. Then Kevin pushed off the tree behind him, stepping closer. Not much, but enough to narrow the space between them into something more deliberate. "I've been thinking too," he said. "I assumed you would." "I'm not going back," he said. The words came out steady, certain. Emily's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough that he saw it. "You're staying," she said. "Yeah." He glanced out at the orchard, then back at her. "Not because I have to, because I want to." She studied him carefully. "That's a significant decision." "It is. And you're sure?" "For once," he said. "I don't have to think twice about it." Her gaze held his for a long moment. And the program? She asked. We build it, he said. But we do it right. Your way and mine. Structure where it matters. Flexibility where it counts. That sounds complicated. It will be, he admitted. But it'll work. She nodded slowly, as if testing the idea, turning it over in her mind the way she did with everything. And where do I fit into that? She asked. The question was quiet. Not guarded, just honest. Kevin didn't look away. You already know, he said. Say it anyway. He took a breath. You stay, he said. Here. With me. With this. We figure it out together. The words hung there, not rushed, not pressured. Just offered. Emily's composure wavered for the first time. Not dramatically. Just enough that the careful distance she usually kept slipped away. You make that sound simple, she said softly. It's not, he replied. But it's worth it. She looked at him, searching. Not for certainty, but for truth. You're not afraid of this? She asked. Of staying? Of committing to something this permanent? Kevin smiled, slower this time, but more certain than he'd felt in years. I was, he said. Turns out I was just waiting for something that mattered enough. Her lips parted slightly, as if to respond, but the words didn't come right away, so he gave her time. For once, he didn't fill the silence. Finally, she exhaled a small, steady breath. I've spent a long time building plans that make sense, she said. Paths that are logical, scalable, predictable. And this isn't that, he said. No, she agreed. It isn't. Another pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, she stepped closer. Which is exactly why it works. Kevin's breath caught. Not in surprise, but in recognition. Because that was the moment. Not the offer. Not the decision. The choice. She met his eyes, steady and certain now. I'll stay, she said. The words landed with quiet finality. Kevin smiled, really smiled, and for the first time it felt like everything had aligned in a way he hadn't dared to expect. Good, he said softly. The space between them closed naturally, no hesitation left to fill it. Around them, the orchard remained unchanged. Rows of trees, steady and patient. But something new had taken root all the same. Not rushed, not forced, just grown. And as the late sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting long shadows across the ground, Kevin realized something simple and profound all at once. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't wondering what came next. He was exactly where he needed to be. And this season, this life was one worth staying for.